The focus on this recorded seminar will be submitting a quarterly wage report in MiUI and then making the subsequent payment. This seminar is applicable to both employers and third-party administrators, or TPAs, so we will be showing most of these tasks from the perspective of both users. Before we jump in, we want to take a little bit of time to talk about what we're going to be covering today. First, I will share with you an overview of MiUI and where the rollout process currently stands. Then, we'll be spending much of our time together today giving you live demonstrations. We'll conclude with sharing some important resources in the event you still need support with navigating your MiUI tax account. So let's do a brief overview of the implementation process of MiUI. As a reminder, UIA will introduce MiUI in two phases. The initial phase for tax launched on February 23, 2026, targeting employers and TPAs. The subsequent benefits phase, which will impact all users, will launch in summer 2026. One thing that we will continue to stress is that employers and TPAs will continue to use MyWAM for benefit-related functionality, such as protesting or appealing a claim during this two-system transition period. Today, we're going to be focused on sharing resources, recommendations, and demonstrations to make your quarterly wage report and payment submissions a success. As a reminder, all quarterly wage reports, including past due, current, and future, will be submitted in MiUI. Wage reports are due on the 25th of April, July, October, and January of each year. If the 25th happens to fall on a weekend or a holiday, the report must be received by the next business day. We will now transition to our system demonstrations showing key functionality within MiUI. We have 6 different demonstrations that we prepared for you today. Each one of these system demonstrations focus on key functionality in MiUI that will be used by both employers and TPAs. As this recorded seminar is just one of the many helpful resources, know that you can continue to visit MiUI University for additional videos or demonstrations on other pieces of functionality. First, we are going to access the file format specification documents and utilize them to build our own wage report. Then, we'll look at how to test our created wage file in MiUI University's Wage File Format Validation tool before submitting it in MiUI. Then, once we have a file that we know is valid, we will submit a wage report from an employer account. We will also demonstrate another option for submitting a wage report for employers called using manual entry. Next, we will show how a TPA can submit a wage report for multiple employers in a single file. And then we will conclude with 2 demonstrations on how to submit a payment, one from the employer perspective and the final from the perspective of a TPA. Let's jump into our first demonstration. Our next demonstration is how to access and utilize the file format specification documents. Now that MiUI for Tax is live, all wage reports must be submitted in MiUI. This includes past due, current, and future reports. There are 4 options at the employer level to submit a quarterly wage report. It includes uploading a file, manual entry, copying from a previously submitted quarter, or recording that no employment and therefore no wages for the quarter. And there are 4 new file format types that are available if choosing to submit your wage report via file upload. Those file format types are delimited, ISESA, EFW2, and XML. Every employer and TPA will need to file with one of these 4 types if they choose to submit via file upload. And please know they are all new as the formats in MyWAM were specific to that system. With several options to choose, let's discuss which filing method may be best for you. We recommend using the file upload option if you are an employer with a large number of employees, as this method efficiently uploads employee information and wage amounts. If you are an employer with fewer employees, it may be easier to manually enter each employee's information directly in MiUI using manual entry. If you are an employer that had minimal changes in wages or employees from a previous quarter, You can use the copy and modify method to quickly populate and edit your wage report. And last, if you had no employees and therefore paid no wages for the quarter, you must submit a no employment and no wage report in MiUI. This confirms that you've had no wages to report. Otherwise, it is considered a late or missing quarterly report and could incur penalties. Please note, all of these options are available from the employer account. From a TPA's account, they will only see the options for file upload and no employment, no wage report. A TPA can still use manual entry and copy and modify, but they must do so one at a time by accessing an associated employer's account individually. If you are choosing to submit your wages via file upload, it is important to review the file format specification documents found in various places in the MiUI Resources for Employers and TPA section in MiUI University. Please note, these documents are being updated as system updates are made. A change log can be found at the end of each file format specification document that displays the version and date of the update. In addition, the file format specification documents can be accessed within MiUI when selecting a file type to upload for your wage submission by selecting the download link next to each file type. Before I demonstrate how to access and navigate a file format specification document, I want to highlight two areas within each document that may be most helpful when creating your wage report file. First, the records table will show you each individual detail that is required to be entered to identify the employer and the employees. It will show the format and an example as well as the maximum length. Next, the example of file layout section will show a screenshot of a sample wage report file of that format. This can be helpful to do a side-by-side comparison of what you are creating versus what is required. Please note that the delimited file as shown is the only file that should contain anything other than alphanumeric values, as it will include commas. The other file types will not accept anything other than alphanumeric information, including hyphens and dashes. Now, let's access MiUI University to access the file format specification documents. To do this, I will return back to the UI homepage that we saw earlier. Notice the female in the yellow cardigan. And I will scroll down and stop at the section with MiUI University. Upon selecting Go to MiUI University, I'm on the landing page. I will scroll down in the bottom left corner. There is the MiUI Resources for Employers and TPA section that was mentioned earlier. Selecting this link will take me to the landing page where I will continue to scroll down until I see 6 different tiles. Here, there are various areas and sections in which you can access the wage report file format specification documents. For this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and select the quarterly wage report file testing section because we're going to access that later when testing our created file. In the quarterly wage report testing section, if I scroll down, the first thing I will see are those file format specification documents. Let's go ahead and select on delimited. Selecting this file format specification document, open the document in the same window where I can scroll down and review the table of contents. The table of contents are consistent across all of the file format specification documents, so the sections you see here are what you will see in the other documents as well. Let's go ahead and select the file format overview. The file format overview provides a description of the contents of the document, including information about submitting wage reports, such as deadlines and who can submit them. Next, I'll select the file's specifications and submissions. The file specifications and submissions section describes the file size limitations to process immediately or if the file be processed through an overnight batch, as well as how to confirm if the file was successfully submitted. Next is the record table section. This is what we looked at earlier in the presentation, and it shows a row-by-row listing of the information needed for each record, including the employer record, and if I continue to scroll, it will show the employee record. For files that require each record to be a certain length, such as ICESA, it will also show a max length in a range column. Please pay close attention to the validation column, as this is what MiUI will compare to your file when identifying records or errors. Next, I will select the Error Messages section. The Error Messages section displays the possible fatal and non-fatal errors that you may receive when uploading your wage report file. As a reminder, records with fatal errors will not be included in the submitted wage report. Records with non-fatal errors will be included, however, you may be assessed penalties if the errors are not corrected. For this reason, it is essential to test your file prior to submitting, and if any errors are present, to correct them before submitting. MiUI will display the error type and a description for each record that contains an error. Next, I'll select Example of File Layout. We also saw this earlier in the presentation. The Example of File Layout section will provide a screenshot of what an example file could look like for the selected file type. We recommend comparing a side-by-side view of your file for accuracy and general formatting. The File Format Document Locations section lists other areas to view the file format specification documents. And last is the document changelog. As mentioned earlier, this is where you can verify any recent updates, and it may be helpful to review this section before each quarterly submission to see if any changes are necessary to your file formats. A few important takeaways to reinforce before continuing. In MiUI, employers and TPAs assigned with proper roles can submit quarterly wage detail reports in MiUI. New formats do exist for the submission of wage details, which includes delimited ICESA, EFW2, or XML files. All of these files contain detailed instructions on MiUI University. When submitting a wage detail report, in addition to uploading a file, authorized users also have the option to report no wages for the quarter, copy and modify a previous quarter's data, or manually input their data. Some frequently asked questions we get is, where can I find a sample wage file? If you're looking for a sample report, you can access the Example of File Layout section within the specification document. And if you're wondering if you need to submit via file upload, as a reminder, the answer is no. You can use any of the other available submission methods in MiUI. Within MiUI University, there is a wage report file format validation tool that we strongly encourage all users to utilize prior to submitting their wage report in MiUI. Here, you can upload a test file just like you would in MiUI, and it will display if the file is valid or if there are errors present. Please note, the validation tool limits is approximately 100 records. It's also meant for testing purposes only, so please consider masking personal identifiable information, such as employee last names or social security numbers. A couple key notes about the validation tool. If when submitting your file it is valid with no errors, you're going to go ahead and see the first message, which is a green valid file message upon uploading and submitting your file. If your file is valid, but some of the test data that you included does have errors, you actually see some of the error messages shown in number 2. And last, if the file format was incorrect, or if it was, in this case, it was over 100 records for the test, you're going to see one of the red error messages listed below. Just remember that the file size limit for the testing tool is only 100 records. MiUI will be able to accept submissions with up to 1,000 records for instant processing, or if it exceeds 1,000 records, will be processed in an overnight batch. Let's go ahead and look at MiUI University and see what this would look like. For the next demonstration, I'm going to access that wage report file format validation tool and show you how you can test a sample wage report file. To do this, I'm going to return back to MiUI University's section of Employer and TPA Resources. Now that I am back on the MiUI Resources for Employers and TPAs landing page, I will scroll down to the bottom where we'll again see those 6 tiles. We're going to go ahead and access the quarterly wage report file testing section. And at this time, instead of selecting the file format specifications, I'm going to scroll past and select Submit a Test Wage Report. This will navigate me to the file testing screen, where here I will go ahead and select the type of file that I want to upload. Using the file format specification documents, I have created a sample delimited file. Notice I've used fictitious names and a fictitious business for this one. And I'm just trying to make sure that my file format is correct and will be accepted before entering in my specific employer and employee record information. Because I'm using a delimited file, I'll select the radio button for delimited and select Choose File. Here, I'll go ahead and select the file that I'm uploading, the test. And next, I will select the checkbox that I've read and understand that this is only for testing purposes before selecting Validate in the lower right corner. I notice here that I did not get the green valid file, but instead got a record number showing that record number 2 has an invalid Social Security number. This means there's an error in my file. I'll return back to my file and review the second record. And then I will refer back to my file format specification document to realize that this is the Social Security number that it's claiming is invalid. Upon further review, I notice that I'm missing a digit. So I'll add the additional digit for the Social Security number, resave my file, and return back to the testing tool to re-upload my corrected file. Once uploaded and the checkbox that I read and understand has been selected, I'll select Validate and Success. This time I have the green valid file bar. This means that the file format that I've created is accepted by MiUI, and I can now use this file format file to go ahead and create my own employer wage report. Now that we finished that demonstration, let's review some key information and frequently asked questions prior to submitting a wage report in MiUI. As a reminder, the wage file format validation tool can be accessed from within MiUI University under the Employer and TPA Resources section. It is highly encouraged to use this tool prior to submitting in MiUI to help identify errors in the new formats. If, when using the file validation tool, you receive an error that the file size limit has been exceeded, please remember that the tool can only process up to 100 records. MiUI will be able to process your full wage report file either instantly, or if it's over 1,000 records, it'll process in an overnight batch. If you get that error during the testing tool, please just reduce the number of test records and resubmit. And again, because this is for testing purposes only, it is highly recommended to mask personal identifiable information, such as the names and Social Security numbers of your employees. Once you've successfully confirmed your format, you can then use that format to create your actual wage report. We have now reviewed the file format specification document, built our wage report file, tested it using the file format validation tool in MiUI University, and I then used that file to create my Q1 2026 wage report file. We're now ready to submit the quarterly wage report. For the next demonstration, I'm going to show how an employer will submit their quarterly wage report via file upload. Please note, TPAs can also submit files from an individual employer account, as well as their TPA accounts for multiple employers. I'm going to demonstrate that later. When we finish submitting the wage report via file upload, I will also demonstrate how employers can submit a wage report manually too. Again, this option is recommended for those employers joining us who have a smaller number of employees. Let's go ahead and get started. First, from within my employer account, I will navigate to the Wage Detail Reporting section in the left navigation menu. Next, I will select the first option for wage submission. While on the screen, I will call out that if you need to submit subsequent wage reports for the same quarter, you would enter the Wage Adjustment section to adjust previously submitted wages. Because this is our original submission for Q1 2026, let's select Wage Submission. This will navigate me to the Reporting Period screen, where I will need to select the quarter that I am submitting my wage report for and verify that it is the correct year. Next, I will need to select the way in which I'm submitting my wage report. We're going to go ahead and select the first option, which is File Upload. Upon selecting Next, we will navigate to the Reporting Information screen that looks almost identical to what we already saw in the Wage File Format Validation tool. I created my delimited file based on the test file format that I used earlier. So I'm going to go ahead and select the delimited option, choose File, and make sure that I'm selecting the quarterly file that I created. I'll then scroll down and select Next. I'll next see this file preview screen where it will list all of the employee records that I just uploaded. Here, I can get a quick overview of the employee information, including their name and the gross wages, and I can continue to scroll through as needed to find other employers, or I can simply enter in information in the search section. Notice there was no errors section shown down below. This would display if I had individual record errors. But because I went through the process of making sure my format was correct, I successfully created a file that had no errors. Here, I can select Next. Upon selecting Next, it takes me to a summary screen where it will show me the summary information of the complete wage file that I submitted, including the total UI gross wages, the number of records, and any associated unit number for my business. This information looks accurate, so I'll go ahead and select Next again. And the final screen will be the certification screen. Here, it will display the quarterly calculations, including the UI gross wages and excess wages, as well as the total taxable wages. Based on my rate, it will then display the UI contribution or the amount owed to the agency. If there were any associated penalties, such as a late reporting penalty or a wage filing penalty, that would also be displayed and be added to the UI contribution. At the very bottom is the total amount due for the quarterly wage report that I just submitted. I then will need to select the checkbox that all the information is complete and true to the best of my knowledge, as this will serve as my digital signature for this wage report. Then I'll select Submit. A pop-up screen will appear asking if I have any other wages to edit, and I do not, so I'm going to go ahead and select the button. I don't have any prior wages reports to edit. And this will take me to a confirmation screen. This also provides a confirmation number for my records. If needed, I could print this screen directly by selecting right on my mouse and print. I can also select the Make Payment button to be directly navigated to the screen where I can submit the payment for the contribution owed, or I can select Home, which I will do, to return to my employer homepage. Once here, I can quickly see that the last quarter reported has been updated to reflect that my submission was successful, and the amount due has now been populated with the UI contribution amount due that was shown on the certification screen. This concludes the demonstration on submitting a wage report via file upload from the employer account. I will now transition to show you how you can submit a wage report via manual entry from an employer account as well. I am now on a different employer's account where I will demonstrate how to submit a wage report via manual entry. To do this, I'm going to go ahead and navigate back to the wage detail reporting section. And again, I'll select wage submission. I will make sure that I'm submitting for the correct quarter and year. And instead of selecting file upload from the filing method section, I will go down and select the third option, which is manual entry, where I can enter individual wage records one by one. I'll select next. Now on the reporting information screen are multiple text box fields where I will enter in each individual employee's information. First with their social security, followed by their last name and first name. Middle initial, if necessary. I'm going to skip that field and jump to unit number and just call out that the unit number or your location number will display here. This particular employer only has one primary unit, and therefore it's only going to allow me to select the 000 without the ability to edit it. If you're an employer that has multiple reporting units, this would be a drop-down menu where you would select the unit for each specific employee. Next, I'll enter in those UI gross wages. I'll leave the owner officer checkboxes no, and I will select yes, that this employee was employed during all 3 months during Q1. When complete, I will select add, and we'll notice that Ava Jones's information will populate in the table below. Within this table, I can go ahead and update the gross wages as well as the month of employment and owner officer dropdowns manually without needing to repopulate the information up above. Let's say I added an employee here and I forgot to add in a field. In this case, I'll skip over the last name field. Upon selecting add, an error message will appear at the top stating, hey, the last name was missing and the record will be processed, but that missing information may result in penalties. So I'll scroll down to my screen and I do see, yep, for Andrew, I did miss that last name. Because this doesn't give me an editable field like some of these others do, I'll simply select the edit pencil icon next to Andrew's record. And when I do so, it will move his information back to the top where I can enter in that last name. Once entered, I'll select update. And we'll now see his last name is populated below. If you ever needed to delete a previously entered record, you could simply select the delete checkbox, and upon selecting next, that employee's information would be removed from your wage report. You'll complete this process over and over again until all employee record information is entered, and when complete, you'll select next. The summary of units reported screen will display again, showing a summary total of the number of records and UI gross wages that you previously entered. I'll select next again to navigate to the certification screen, which will show me the quarterly calculations, including the total gross wages again, and more importantly, the taxable wages and the contribution due. If there were any applicable penalties or interest, it would also be displayed and be added to your contribution amount due to make up your quarterly amount due to the agency. If this information is correct, I'll select the checkbox to e-certify my information and then select submit. The pop-up message will display again, asking if I have to edit prior wages, which I don't, so I'll select that I do not have to edit prior wage reports. And the confirmation screen, including the confirmation number, will display once more. I can select Make Payment to navigate to the Make Payment screen, or simply select Home like I will do to return back to the employer homepage screen, where we'll once again see the amount due is updated with the quarterly amount due that was shown in the certification screen, as well as the last quarter reported has now been updated to Q1 2026. Now that we completed the demonstration of submitting an employer wage report via the employer account, let's cover a few points about submitting that wage report. If you're an employer who has a smaller number of employees, it's recommended to go ahead and submit that wage report manually. If you were an employer that had minimal changes to enter from a previous submission, you're recommended to use that copy and modify feature. Please note that if copying and modifying wage records with over 1,000 employees won't be able to use that copy and modify feature, and an error message will display on the screen that you must submit a new file. Employers with that large number of employees are recommended to submit their files using the file upload method. And once more, you must submit a wage record for all quarters, even if in the quarter in question had no employees or wages. In these instances, employers would simply verify and confirm that they had a zero wage report because of having no employees or wages for that quarter. And then, can you continue to submit a wage report if you do have errors that are shown? And the answer to that is yes. If your wage report file has less than 100 total errors and less than 25% of the employees have an error record to them, you can go ahead and submit your wage report. But please note there may be penalties that could be incurred. Let's take a few moments to review those details before moving on to our TPA submission. As you saw during our demonstration, MiUI does validate wage file reports for fatal and non-fatal errors. When the file you uploaded is returned as clean, meaning there are no errors, you're going to see the reporting information screen that displays each line of wage detail record, and there is no listed errors beneath. Please note that if a file contains zero errors, it will still display a for detailed error description, refer to the error details page. MiUI will also notify employers and TPAs if their manual entries contain fields that will trigger an error, such as missing the last name, like I just displayed in our demonstration. When there are errors, a file error section will appear below the employee wages, listing the specific record, the error, and whether it is fatal or non-fatal. Example of fatal errors in an uploaded file include missing or an invalid employer account number, invalid social security number, or the employee's unemployment insurance gross wages are missing. Some examples of non-fatal errors include missing social security numbers, or an employee's middle and name initial is an invalid value. As a reminder, if the total errors are less than 25% or 100 total errors, MiUI will still accept the file. The employer or TPA will need to select, though, how they want to proceed. There will be three options listed below. The first option is to ignore the errors and continue, meaning you're just going to submit the file as is. If you choose to submit the file as is and the fatal errors are not corrected, those specific records will be excluded from the wage report. In that scenario, if non-fatal errors are submitted without a waiver affidavit or are not corrected within 14 days of the file submission, the records will be included in the wage report. However, you will be assessed a wage filing penalty for incomplete records. The second option is that you can make corrections and resubmit. The employer or TPA can continue to resubmit the file as many times as you want to lower the percentage of errors to ensure the total amount is less than the 25% maximum, or to limit the number of errors before submitting. For any number of errors under 25%, whether it's one error or the maximum allowable amount, it can continue to be submitted. The final option is you can select to upload a waiver request affidavit for missing information. Additional screens will display to upload this affidavit, justifying the reason for incomplete employee information upon submitting your wage report. And the last scenario is when you're uploading a file and it's rejected in its entirety. When this happens, you may see one of the following errors. First, the file format does not match the new file format specifications as we discussed earlier. You will see an error message stating the file format is invalid. Second, you may see a yellow banner displaying that the file cannot be processed since it contains a combination of fatal and non-fatal errors for more than 25% of the employee records. And third, a yellow banner may display that your wage file has a combination of more than 100 total errors. In any of these three situations, the only option available for you is to correct your file and resubmit. We would encourage you to reference the wage file format specification documents that we reviewed earlier and utilize the wage file format validation tool to confirm your formatting prior to resubmitting in MiUI. Now that we have successfully submitted a wage report from the employer account, we will now demonstrate how a TPA can submit a wage report for multiple employers associated to their account. As a reminder, TPAs must be assigned the Submit Employment and Wage Detail role by the employer in order to submit wages on their behalf. Note, for this demonstration, the file will be processed instantly because it's only going to contain 2 employers. If it contained 5 or more employers, or the total number of employee records exceeded 1,000, it will be processed through an overnight batch. After this demonstration, I'll show some brief information on what that batch process looks like. For the demonstration, I will begin on the TPA homepage. For TPAs, there are 2 options to submit the wage report. I can access the wage detail reporting from the left navigation menu and select wage submission and adjustment. Notice this is different from the employer's account in the sense that the submission and adjustment pathway is the same button, whereas for employers, it was 2 different. Another option is I can select the file bulk report directly from the TPA homepage. I'm going to go ahead and select that file bulk report button. Notice that upon selecting it, it basically takes me to the same location in the drop-down menu. Here, I will see the 2 filing methods available to me as a TPA. As a reminder, if I still wanted to do manual entry or copy and modify, I could do so, but I would need to access each individual employer's account to do that from their perspective. For this demonstration, let's go ahead and select the File Upload button and select Next. This will take me to the screen that looks just like it did from the employer standpoint, as well as from the validation tool. And for this TPA, I have a sample ISESA file, which I'm displaying now, that I'm going to upload for 2 employers, Harrison Family Landscaping and Grand Illusion Submarines. Because this is an ISESA file, I'll select that ISESA button, select Choose File, and make sure I select the correct file from the window that appears. I'll select Next. This will take me directly to the Summary of Units Reported screen, so I will not see each individual employee record information from the TPA perspective, but instead I will see the summary information linked to each employer. So I noticed that for Harrison Family Landscaping, I had 10 total employee records. That totaled just over $97,000 in gross wages. And I'm actually submitting for a previous quarter that I'm late upon. Similar for Grand Illusion Submarines, you can see the number of records and the gross wages. I'll go ahead and select Next. And the certification screen for the TPA perspective does look a little bit different, as it will display the gross wage amount that we previously saw, and it will show the quarterly amount due. If this information is accurate, I'll go ahead and select that I certify the information provided is complete and true to the best of my knowledge before selecting Submit. Once the wages are successfully submitted, I will see the confirmation screen, and notice it will display a confirmation number for each employer that was uploaded, so I have 2 that are listed. Here, I can select Make Payment to navigate to the screen to make payments on behalf of these employers, or I can select Home to return to my TPA homepage. Now that we completed the demonstration on submitting a wage report from a TPA account for multiple employers, let's review some key information and FAQs. First, a TPA must have the Submit Employment and Wage Detail role assigned to them by their employer. From the TPA account, TPAs will have the options to submit via file upload or submit that zero wage report for their employers. Also of note, if the wage report is processed instantly, meaning it contains less than 5 total employers and less than 1,000 employee records, the same error thresholds apply at the individual employer level. This means that if one single employer surpasses the threshold of more than 25% records with an error or 100 total errors, the entire file will be rejected. Some FAQs. If I have permission to submit for an employer who has not yet activated their account, will it submit? And the answer to that is yes. The wage report will still be accepted even if your employer has not yet activated their account. However, please encourage your employer to activate their account so that additional permissions can be added if needed so that you can continue to perform actions on their behalf. The next question is, if an employer who associated my TPA to the account has provided them with that submit employment and wage detail role that we provided earlier, but upon submission, they're getting an error message stating that the agent is unauthorized to submit wages for the for an employer specific unit number, what should I do? For employers that have multiple reporting units, please make sure that after they are assigning the submit an employment wage detail role to the TPA, there's an additional screen where they will need to select the appropriate reporting units to assign that role to. Make sure that they have the associated reporting units selected when assigning that role. You can submit wages to all units if necessary. Our demonstration was for a TPA file that only contained 2 employers and had less than 1,000 records, so therefore it processed immediately. If I had uploaded a file that had over 1,000 employee records, or the TPA file had 5 or more distinct employers, I would have received a message that said, the uploaded file is larger than the limit and it's going to be processed overnight. This would mean that I as a TPA would need to wait until 8 a.m. Eastern the next day and then access the View Submission History page to see the results of the wage report. If I attempted to go to the submission history page prior to 8 a.m. Eastern the next day, I'm going to see a summary of the submission, but it's going to say that it's pending and there will be no confirmation number listed. Once the file processes after 8 a.m. the next morning, I could access the screen and I would see that the status is now going to say processed and a confirmation number will be listed. Not only that, but there's going to be a confirmation hyperlink that'll give you a report of any errors that were included in the report. So, in either real time for files less than 1,000 records or in an overnight batch, you will get to see your wage report was submitted and immediately see all the errors that could potentially be included. Some key information about submitting a bulk wage report that required an overnight batch. First, MiUI will still complete an initial validation of the first 3 records to confirm the file format is viable. If MiUI determines the file format is incorrect, an error message will display to correct the file and submit it again. If the file format was accepted, the wage report still may contain record errors and therefore may still be rejected if it exceeds the thresholds. If an overnight batch wage report contains an employer's records with more than 25% records, only that employer will be rejected, not the entire file. Please note that this is different than the wage reports that are processed immediately. As a reminder, MiUI processes files in the overnight batch if it contains 5 or more total employers or exceeds the 1,000 total employee records. To view those submission results, you would navigate to the View Submission History screen after 8 a.m. Eastern the next business day. And what happens if you submit multiple records for the same employer in 2 separate files? Well, MiUI will still process it, but it's going to treat the second and any thereafter wage report file that uploaded for the same employer for the same quarter as a wage file adjustment. The next thing that we're going to look at is how to submit a payment in MiUI. In MiUI, employers and TPAs that have the proper role permission can submit payments. MiUI recognizes a lot of different payment types. You can choose to make a loose payment, which is when you choose the amount. You could create a payment plan. You can create a quarterly report payment for the total amount due for the quarter. And please know that both ACH credit and ACH debit are going to continue to be available to you in MiUI. Like before, I will demonstrate how an employer makes a payment from their account, and then I will demonstrate how a TPA can submit a bulk payment. I am now on the employer homepage. This is the employer that earlier we submitted a wage report via file upload. And notice I can see that there is an amount due of the $25,906.50. To make a payment, I have multiple ways in order to get to the screen to enter my payment information. Notice there's a Make Payment button directly here on the employer homepage. I can also navigate to the left navigation menu of the employer homepage and select Payment Information. And I can select Current Outstanding Balance to see the balance of each quarter. I can also select Financial Transaction Summary screen, which if there's an amount due will also show a Make Payment button. For simplicity, I'm going to go ahead and just select the Make a Payment button directly on the employer homepage. You'll notice selecting that button actually takes me to the Current Outstanding Balance drop-down menu that I earlier shown. I can see here that I still owe that Q1 2026 balance of $25,000. So I'm going to go ahead and select that radio button and select Make Payment. This will navigate me to the Payment Method screen. If I scroll down, I can see that I have selected the quarterly report payment option since I selected the current outstanding balance and selected that Q1 amount. Once I select that radio button, the total amount due has been populated. And next, I will select my payment medium or method of payment. I'm going to go ahead and do ACH debit. Please note that if you do want to use ACH credit payments, you would select this fact sheet hyperlink to see more information. After selecting ACH debit, the Schedule a Payment and Payment Profile options sections display. If I wanted to schedule a payment, I can do so by selecting the checkbox and then entering in the future date. Please note, employers will be able to schedule payments. However, TPAs will not have this option from their TPA account profile when submitting a bulk payment. If you are a TPA that wants to schedule a payment, you would need to do so by accessing each individual employer account and making the payment directly from within there. I'm going to make the payment instantly, so I'm going to go ahead and unselect that checkbox. And down below, I will see a Payment Profile Options section. Here, it will list the payment profiles that I've already added into MiUI. Please note that your previous payment profiles did not transfer over from MyWAM. Therefore, if this is the first time you are making a payment in MiUI, you will need to select the Add Payment Profile option, select the type of payment you want to create, and then select Next to enter in the information about that specific account. Since I already have one added in here, I will go ahead and select the radio button for the payment profile. Note, if you ever need to edit the payment profile that you previously entered, simply select the pencil icon and the pop-up window will display where you can enter the information directly. Now that I've selected the payment amount, the payment medium, and the payment profile that I want to use to make this payment, I will select Next. Before submission, I will see a verification screen, so please review this to make sure that the information is accurate. Notice here you can see the last four of the bank account number, the bank account name, the total payment amount, as well as the payment effective date. If it looks good, I'll go ahead and hit Submit. And if the payment was successful, I will see a payment confirmation screen. It also displays a payment confirmation number. If I select Home, it'll take me back to the employer homepage, and you'll notice that the amount due has now been updated to $0 now that my payment has been submitted. Now that I demonstrated how an employer would submit a payment from their employer account, we'll now look at how a TPA would submit a bulk payment for multiple employers. I'm back on my TPA homepage, and this is the same TPA that we submitted a wage report for in an earlier demonstration. In order to make a payment, I would need to navigate from the TPA's homepage to the left navigation menu and select Payment Information. Next, I would select the first option, which is Payment Options. Here, I can select to make a full payment for all assigned employer debt. You can see that listed here. If I want to initiate a payment based on file uploads, I would select this link. This link would download an allocation file where it lists each employer balance, as well as the EAN information. I could then edit that file to replicate the amounts that I want to make on behalf of each of those employers, and then select Choose File to upload it back into the system. Further information for that process is available on MiUI University. For this demonstration, I'm going to go ahead and select the option that I want to make a full payment for all employers. When I select that hyperlink, it takes me back to a payment method screen that's very similar to what we saw in the employer account. Notice again, if I want to make a payment by credit, I'll click here to find that fact sheet. I can then select my payment medium, which is defaulted to ACH debit, which is what I want to use for this account, so I'll let that go. And because I selected to pay the full amount is populated and I cannot edit it. Again, if you want to make a different payment amount, you would need to download that allocation file and make edits and upload it back. Similar to the employer account, I see the payment profile options. As a reminder, TPA payment profiles also did not transfer over from MyWAM to MiUI. So if this is the first time you're making a payment in MiUI, you will need to re-enter your payment information. To do so, just select that Add Payment Profile button, select the account type, and enter in the account information. I already have a previously used payment profile in here, so I will go ahead and select the radio button for that payment profile. I will select Next. It will take me to a payment verification screen, just like we saw before, where I would want to validate that the last four of the bank account number, the routing number, and the total payment amount does look accurate. Since it does, I'll select Submit to submit the payment. I get a confirmation screen, which again displays a payment confirmation number, meaning that my payment has gone through. At this time, I can select Home to return back to the home page, or if there was additional payments I needed to make, I could go ahead and select the Make Payment button. To conclude our section on submitting a payment, let's review some key information. As a reminder, TPAs must be assigned the Edit Tax Payments Update and Submit role in order to submit payments on behalf of their associated employers. Also, payment profiles can only be added or modified when a balance exists on the employer or TPA account. Some FAQs from this session include: first, will a TPA no longer be able to schedule a payment for the employer as is now done in MyWAM? And this is correct. TPAs will no longer be able to schedule bulk payments from their TPA account. They can, however, schedule payments for individual employers, but you would need to access the employer account to do this. Second, will the employer's payment profiles carry over from MyWAM? And the answer to that is no. Payment profiles were not carried over from MyWAM to MiUI and therefore will need to be recreated in MiUI. Last, we want to remind you to please continue to use all of the resources out there in MiUI University, not only to support account activation and wage reporting, but additional functionality, such as payments. As a final reminder as well, MiUI and MiWAM are being used today to perform distinct tasks. Posted within MiUI University is a helpful quick reference guide, which explains what functions are active in MiUI, which will be retired, and which you will continue to perform in MiWAM during this two-system transition period. As referenced earlier, MiUI University continues to be updated with resources even after a go-live. Here, you can continue to find information on activating your account, navigating your account, and completing many tasks outside of what was covered today. Thank you for spending part of your day with us to learn about MiUI, and we hope you found value in this information in the demonstrations as you begin to file your wage reports in MiUI.